A few years ago, my son and I were invited with another family to a church event, and it happened to be this other family's church. And my son and this other family's son were really good buddies. And so we went and we had a great time. It was really a wonderful event, and the boys had a wonderful time themselves. But they were showing some films to illustrate some points. And there was a couple of clips that really were just inappropriate, probably for boys this age, for younger kids that were there. And the mother of the good friend of ours was really outraged by this. She couldn't believe that they had actually, had these particular clips embedded in the overall story that they were trying to show and demonstrate. And so she had made a complaint to the leaders of this particular event. And a few days later, I received an apology letter in the mail. And the point of this story is that this was one of the finest apology letters I've ever received. It was absolutely amazing. And not only did the person acknowledge what had happened, they took responsibility for it, even though they weren't necessarily in charge of the event. They still took responsibility being the head of the event itself. And they talked about what they had learned and what they would do different next time. And that's always stuck with me, is that this apology letter I received was just so thorough and so complete and so sincere that it just stayed with me for a long time. And so it got me thinking, how do we make apologies to our partners? Because when we have ruptures and we try to make repairs, it's often common for partners to come back together to say that they're sorry for some aspect of the disagreement or the conflict itself. But what I've often seen is that apologies can tend to be rather hollow, meaning that there's not enough substance to it. There's not enough substance in the apology itself for the other person, one, to either feel felt, meaning to feel like this person, my partner, gets it and understands the way I feel, and also to really feel understood. My partner understands why I feel the way I do. And so I thought today this would be a good podcast when we come back to apologize to our partner. And this doesn't have to be like a massive disruption that happens. It could be something small, but nonetheless, in the heat of the moment, we could all say things we don't mean, or we could all have tones that we don't mean. And when we come back to apologize, there's a way to give a really good apology, and there's a way that an apology can feel hollow and insincere. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, the anatomy of a sincere apology. Let's get started.
Welcome to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast that provides support and guidance to help heal the wounds of attachment trauma. Whether you find yourself struggling with unresolved issues in the past or have experienced trauma in your current relationship, our goal is to provide accurate, scientifically informed information, as well as the tools to help you create a secure connection between you and your partner. And here's your host, Tom Philp.
Okay, I actually want to start with what not to do in giving a sincere apology, and then we're going to move to what do we need to do. There's a couple of things that I think are really important for us not to do when we're giving a sincere apology. The first one is we have to watch our tone. If we're going to give an apology, it has to be sincere, which means we have to soften our tone, and we can't come defensive. There's a big difference between, well, I'm sorry, but versus, honey, I'm really sorry. Or, I'm really sorry I said that. There's a softness in the tone. So we have to be careful of our tone. If it's heartfelt, if it's sincere, then your tone is going to match that. Your tone is going to match your heart when you're giving a sincere apology. So we really need to be careful about watching our tone and not trying to apologize when we're still in a defensive place. It's really better not to apologize if we're still defensive. And we might even communicate that to our partner. I know I need to apologize, but I'm not in a place to do it right now because I'm still a little bit defensive. So give me some time and then I will come to you. And that way I can give you a sincere apology. That would almost be better to say to your partner than saying nothing at all or just being defensive. So watching our tone when we give an apology is really important. We don't want to add any disclaimers or qualifiers, meaning we don't want to say, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry, however. We want to be able to say, I'm sorry for dot, dot, dot. I'm sorry I called you that. I'm sorry I criticized you for this. I'm sorry I got defensive. I should have been more calm, so on and so forth. So if we add a but, then it disqualifies everything that came before. And I'm sure you've probably heard this before, that anything that follows a but is nullified. And that's largely true because what the partner is hearing is everything that comes after the but. I'm sorry I said that, but when you said, now what they're hearing is not the I'm sorry, they're hearing, oh, it's actually your fault. And this is where couples begin to feel like, well, when I apologize or when we sit down and talk, things get turned around on me. I hear that often with couples. Yeah, we can talk, but then when I'm trying to share my heart or I'm trying to share my feelings, it gets turned around on me. And that's because the partner is in a place where they want to say they're sorry, but they're really not sorry. They're still trying to explain themselves. And so a sorry might come with a disclaimer or a qualifier. And we don't want to, any sincere apology needs to eliminate that. We don't want to make empty or unrealistic promises. I know a lot of people will apologize out of fear that their partner might be done, fear that their partner is just fed up. And so they can make empty or unrealistic promises. I will never do that again. Well, maybe, but maybe not. What's better to say is, I'm going to work really hard on not doing that again. I'm going to be more mindful of your need in this area so that I try not to remember to do that anymore. I've seen promises like, I'll change who I am, especially when couples that are in a very fragile place and it feels like the end of the relationship. Someone who's scared to lose their partner will say, I'll change who I am. No, you're not really going to change who you are. You may change some aspects of your behavior. You may change some of your feelings towards your partner, feelings towards yourself. You may heal some traumas that is getting in the way of the relationship and a secure attachment, but you're not going to change your whole personality. And so we want to stay away from any empty or unrealistic promises. The last thing I would say is we don't want to make it about your feelings. So sometimes I see when somebody's trying to apologize, they end up taking the focus totally on themselves. Maybe they get so dysregulated in the apology that now the person they're trying to apologize has to put aside any of their hurt in order to take care of that person that is trying to make the apology, the apologizer, if you will. And so we don't want to make it about ourselves. If we feel like we're going to get so dysregulated that we end up talking more about our feelings and our perspective and why we did what we did, then we're not really apologizing at that point. We're more explaining what was happening with us, why we did what we did, as opposed to actually apologizing for it. So those are some things not to do. Those are some watch outs. In order to give a sincere apology, we don't want to come with a defensive tone. We don't want to have any disclaimers or qualifiers to our apologies. Well, I apologize, but, or, I wouldn't have said that if you hadn't. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make any unrealistic or empty promises. We're not going to completely change overnight. That's not how change works, at least with our human behavior. And so making sure we have realistic things we say, such as, I will try hard to work on this. I know you need this, and I will try to meet your need more in this area. And then finally, we don't want to make it about ourselves. We don't want to end up talking more about our perspective and our feelings. We want to keep the focus on the other person. So those are some things not to do. Now the question becomes, well, how do we give a sincere apology? What are the things we need to do? Now, I alluded to this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast when I mentioned that I had received a note that was one of the finest apologies I'd ever received before. And so there were certain things in there that I have remembered through the years. I've not only used them myself when I needed to apologize, but I've tried to teach others about it too, because I just thought it was so good and so thorough and so genuine. And so the first thing is we need to be able to acknowledge the offense. We need to be clear about what we're apologizing for. We don't want to downplay it, and we don't want to make excuses. I'm sorry I attacked you. That was unfair. That might be acknowledging our offense. I'm sorry I called you this name. You didn't deserve that. Right? Notice there's no qualifiers there. I only said because. We don't want that. You want to acknowledge the offense. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what I hear with couples a lot is that, well, I didn't mean to. And you're exactly right. You may not have meant to hurt your partner's feelings, but that doesn't mean that you didn't, that there's a behavior or a word that you said that did hurt your partner's feelings. I remember my boys growing up, and oftentimes my older boy would accidentally hurt, as you know, any two boys will get into some rough patches sometimes. Then he would hurt his younger brother. And we would have to say the same thing to him. I know you didn't mean to hurt them, because that's his first line of excuse. I didn't mean to. No, of course not. Of course you didn't. But you still did. So being able to acknowledge the offense and without making excuses or downplaying it is really important in terms of being able to give a sincere apology. Being able to express remorse. Again, this is a little bit with what goes along with watching your tone, but show that you understand how your actions affected the other person and that you actually feel bad about it. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to or intend to, but I can see that I did. And the last thing in the world I'd want to do is hurt your feelings. You mean too much to me. And so I know that my behavior or what I said at that point really hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. So you have a tone that is remorseful. You're acknowledging the offense, what you did, and you're understanding how it affected the person. I know that when I hurt you, that you tend to pull away and you begin to question my love for you. And I don't ever want you to question my love for you, because it's, even though I act poorly sometimes, I always love you, even in those hard moments between us. So expressing remorse for what you've done is really important. Take responsibility. Own up to your mistakes. Don't say things like, I'm sorry if, or I'm sorry, but. Say, I'm sorry that. I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry that I missed our date. I'm sorry that I forgot our anniversary. I'm sorry that I did this or that, or so on and so forth. I'm sorry that I, um, hid some money from you, or whatever the situation might be, the type of rupture. Hopefully, they're small ruptures that we're apologizing for. Sometimes with larger ruptures, they can call for multiple apologies, not just in one sit down or one occasion. But taking responsibility is hugely important. The person you're apologizing to needs to know that you are taking responsibility for what you've done or what you've said. And there can be no qualifications about that. There can be, like I said, taking full responsibility is not saying I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry if. It is saying I am sorry that I did such and such. So being able to take responsibility for what you said or did, it is just hugely important in being able to give a sincere apology. It's also part of growth. It's part of our maturity as human beings. People that can't take responsibility for their actions are very immature on the inside. They act more like children than adults. So we want to step up. We want to be a full participatory partner to our partner. And that means taking responsibility, whether we meant to do something or not. It means owning our actions. It means owning our feelings. Okay, another thing that we want to do for sincere apologies is to offer to make amends. If there's something we can do to fix it, this is really important. Sometimes an apology isn't enough. There might be something we need to do to make it better for the person. So sometimes we need to ask, what can I do to make this better for you? Or I will work on this so that I don't do this again. Next time I won't forget our anniversary. I'm going to make a note and I'm going to show you how much I care about you and how important this relationship is. And so I won't forget an anniversary again. And then you're starting to make many notes for yourself. You put it on your work calendar, you put it on your phone calendar, you put it on your home calendar, whatever it is, you give yourself a 3 months reminder, a 6 months reminder, whatever you do so that you don't do that again. So making amends is really important. This also goes to not repeating the same behaviors that caused the hurt in the first place. A person cannot forgive and move past and heal something that continues to happen. It's a little bit like if I, saw my best friend and every time I saw him, I punched him in the arm. And he said, "Man, please stop that." And I say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Can you forgive me?" And he says, "Yes." But then the next time I see him, I punch him in the arm again. At some point, he's going to be like, "You know what? I don't forgive you because the action is still happening." So in order to make amends, sometimes it's a matter of stopping a behavior or stopping saying things. Other times it might be a way that we have to actually try to make up for something by doing something additional. And that's really important to figure out which is which. All right, the last one is respecting the other person's reaction. The person you hurt may not be ready to forgive you right away. They may need additional time or space to process things, and that just has to be okay. It doesn't nullify your attempt to make a sincere apology. It's still worth doing every single time. We don't want to get into a place where we refuse to make an apology because the person doesn't forgive us right away, or their reaction to our apology causes us to then somehow re-hurt that person with our reaction, and then we just get into a vicious cycle. So we want to be able to respect the other person's reaction. They hopefully will soften when they hear our apology, but they may not be ready to forgive right away. They still may be hurt by that. So don't expect your apology to completely wipe the slate clean or completely think, okay, now we've hit the reset button, everything's fine. Sometimes it takes multiple apologies. And I will say this, the bigger the rupture, the more apologies are necessary. The more our partner really needs to hear from us, "Hey, I'm really sorry that happened. I want to tell you again, I take full responsibility for it. I acknowledge it. I hear you, and I'm working on that never happening again." So here's a couple of examples I've tried to just sketch out. And of course, you can add many of your own with any of those elements that I just talked about. But here's one example. "I'm sorry I got defensive. I need to be more patient when you are frustrated and let you talk rather than getting upset myself. I will work on that in the future because I want you to be able to share your feelings with me." That's a nice apology, obviously with a minor rupture there. Another apology might sound like this: "I'm sorry I attacked your family in our argument. I know how much it hurts you when I attack them when I'm angry. I promise I will work on trying not to bring them up anymore during our arguments, especially when we're arguing about something else. I understand if you are still upset and need some time, and if you want to talk more about this, I'm open to having that conversation." So here's something that maybe is a pattern that gets repeated, but you're acknowledging that pattern and you're acknowledging a place you go to that's frustrating and that can be very hurtful. in an argument with your partner. Of course, you can add many more examples yourself. Think about those 5 different elements: acknowledging the offense, expressing remorse, taking responsibility, offering to make amends, and respecting the other person's reaction. And I want to say that oftentimes apologies can go hand in hand. So as you're making an apology, then your partner might need to make an apology as well. Don't get upset if they don't offer that right away. They still may be in a defensive place. They still may be hurt by something that happened. But oftentimes, when we do make an apology, it can soften our partner, and then they can begin to apologize for things that they've done in an argument or a rupture as well. The better we get at making these sincere apologies, I think the more trust we build up in the relationship, the quicker we can begin to make repairs to the ruptures that happen. And I think the more confidence we begin to feel in the relationship that, okay, this is hard. We've just gone through a particularly difficult time in our relationship, but I know my partner, he's apologized in the past, and he will do so again. I know my partner, she will eventually soften, and she will come back and apologize for what was said. And so I can wait patiently for that as I ready myself for that type of apology. But being able to make sincere apologies are an art form, if you will, but is vastly important in being able to repair ruptures in our relationships. Hey, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. As always, I love the feedback you're giving me. Don't be afraid to download our free couples workbook that you can get. I included in the link where I posted the podcast on each one of the streaming sites. You can always call and reach out for a coaching call. I love the people I'm working with and getting to experience all across the country and even internationally some as well. So if you feel like you need more help, you want to flesh out these concepts more in your relationship, don't be afraid to reach out. So until next time, we'll talk to you then.
Thank you for listening to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.